Aloha. Good to see everybody. Real informal today. These are obviously not welcoming remarks because you've already spent a great deal of time bonding, doing good business together, sharing ideas these last couple days. But I feel just grateful to get to spend time with friends. And it has been quite the rocky road in many ways for us, but we're still here over these last couple years. And if I may just retell a little bit of the story so that people see the perspective of how far we've all come, probably where we have to go. When we came together and I was given the honor to serve as governor back a couple years ago, we were really just coming out of what was our most difficult time, which was COVID, where if you remember correctly on about, I think it was mid-March, about March 17th of 2000, we had a 99.6% decrease in our travelers, a total existential crisis as we got through COVID. And unlike a lot of places, we were able to recover, but the recovery doesn't happen like that, doesn't happen instantaneously. So in 2022, late 2022, when I started this job, after we had restored much of our travel, but not all, of course, we were just beginning to heal. And what I have seen from the perspective of tourism, from the negotiations that the nurses in Hawaii Pacific Health and Kapi'olani just did, from the perspective of everyone, people are still feeling that wave of those 2.5 years wash over them. And in some cases, industries are trying to catch up. A lot of our inflationary challenges are connected to that without a doubt. And these are real issues, not the least of which also is the weak yen. And until the yen strengthens, we know that we're going to struggle to bring some people back, although I'm going to touch on Japan in a second. And I'm grateful to HTA, I'm grateful to Mufi for getting me out there. I'm grateful to Jimmy, everybody. So these are realities for us that we all acknowledge. And the good news is, what I feel is that as long as the rest of the world feels our values in the state of the state of Hawaii, they feel our sense of aloha, that they actually and really believe that this is how we care for people, Hawaii will continue to keep its place at the absolute upper echelon of travel and tourism. There's no question in my mind, after speaking to people, as was shared, not just here in our state, but in other states and around the world, globally, that's what people really feel. So we have to maintain that. So that was our first year, just coming out of that. And I think if you recall, one of the very first things that I was asked to do was essentially mediate the dispute that we had. We were at an impasse between how we were going to go forward with regenerative tourism and management of tourism and marketing. And we stepped right into that fray and made sure that we worked that out so that our friends and allies, CNHA, were able to work with HVCB, and we go forward together. Again, when the world sees us working together, whatever it is that we decide to do, again, they feel who we are. And as long as they feel Hawaii is something extraordinary, special, and different, we're going to win. People are going to continue to come and want to experience Hawaii. And that was very important. Had we ended up in an impasse and not put in our budgetary needs for advertising, if we'd not done those things and resolved that difference, they would have been able to sense that. And that would have hurt us much more than any of our own internal challenges. And I just want to be blunt about that, and I think that was important, that we move forward, and I think we're on a good trajectory now. And we have more good thought leaders across the board, because now we have additionally, in addition to the people we were traditionally using, we have CNHA, and we have Kuhio, and we have a lot of that kind of value system also helping us augment what we are. And I think that we are better off for it in the aggregate. So that was our first year, working that out. Then comes our second year, and just as we're getting our, kind of our stride, hitting our stride, August 8th hits. And August 8th, 2023, the fire. The fire, of course, was devastating, and I don't know, because I know you guys are so focused on your disciplines, I don't know if everyone knows. They know it was a total disaster, but there are a couple points I need to make about what we went through and why it's important that we did what we did. So first of all, people felt a deep pain here, and the millions and millions of people that have gone to Maui and have taken their picture in front of the banyan tree and gone and stayed at all the beautiful hotels we have, they felt pain because they saw on national and international TV the sheer scope of the tragedy. And though admittedly I would have preferred if some of our celebrities didn't say anything about whether we should or shouldn't travel yet, I wish they would have left it purely to our industry. It's very hard not to have human nature kick in. And people, of course, are going to say just where their heart is and what they're feeling. And it was a shock to the system, as we know. 3,071 families were displaced. Just so you know the scope of the economic impact, it was a $13 billion disaster. $13 billion. $6 billion is being supported by the federal government through FEMA and the disaster relief monies, which will now flow a little more quickly because of the disaster that's just happened from the Hurricane Helene down in the south. It's a $100 billion disaster. Our $1.2 billion is a small fraction of that. So that's going to help our legislators with the resources and the county rebuild. But $13 billion from that disaster, 6 from the feds, then 3 from the insurance industry, and the settlement is $4.037 billion. Today at noon is actually a big day. The ATF report's going to come out. And why do I share this? Because it's just details. It's details about what happened, and I don't cast blame ever. I instead prefer to say, look, we're all responsible, because that's what we are. We use the word ohana for a reason. We actually believe in it. And so healing is important to us, and actually being responsible to our own recovery together absolutely was critical. And by doing this recovery, even before the final reports came out, and they're going to say exactly what you all know, that a fire occurred because poles went down, fire was dangerously spread by high winds, and there was a lot of heroic efforts, but to no avail in some cases. That's really what the reports are going to show. But why did we settle? Because if this was prolonged and constantly in our collective conscious, we would have seen it on TV for 5 or 7 years. It would have certainly impacted people's ability to decide to come back to Hawaii. And settling it now means that people can get resources and rebuild their lives. So our state contributed about 20% of the settlement. About 50% came from HICO, another 20% came from Kamehameha Schools, which has a lot of land, and they were generous, and then the balance came from the telecommunications folks. But why do I share that with you? Because putting it behind us, not having litigation for all those years, not making our families wait, being able to put those dollars back into the rebuild makes all the difference. So as of now, I told you those 3,071 families were displaced. All of them were immediately put in 13 days into hotel rooms, so we are forever thankful to the hotel industry for doing that. And then we got everyone over the course of 11 months into long-term housing, which opens that up again. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it causes a big ripple effect. Putting people into hotels, huge impact. Putting people into the short-term rentals turned long-term rentals, huge impact. And we can argue and debate what the right moves are, but we had to care for people because we couldn't have 3,000 families leave the state of Hawaii all at once. That's just too much. So we retained the integrity of Maui. 100% of the debris has been cleared from the residential lots, which means people will build their houses this year. That will give people hope. It will also make it palatable to travel to Maui again because people won't feel that it's a scar. They'll see the wound healing. And forgive the medical metaphor, obviously that's where I live my life, but that's how I wanted us to heal our state and not have a lingering 3-year depression, essentially, which when you have that kind of economic downturn, it is usually characterized as a depression. And we couldn't afford that. So, I reached humbly out to our legislative leaders and said, we want to heal now and we will find a way, because we take the short-term pain, but for the long-term recovery. And that's really what we were doing this last year. And it was difficult, but you guys have been wonderful. The industry raised incredible resources. For example, Moof and I went with some of the gang just this last week with Senator DeCoite and others, Wakai. We went to LA to thank them, first of all. We did it because it's in our hearts. They gave us $450,000 cash, about $1.5 million in other resources. We went there and we set up a new relationship which is with the Los Angeles Rams, which you will hear more about coming in the few weeks. Of course, it was at great pain because our dear Mufi had to wear Los Angeles Rams gear for several hours, which I have pictures of, and I will share the next time he F's me up. I'm going to put that up on the thing, okay? He knows I have that. It's now on my ringtones, okay? Which is a great pleasure to me. But that was an amazing trip, and it showed that we can heal. And what I wanted to say more about that was the world saw us recover, and they saw the word resilient is used too frequently now in cliche terms, but they really did see how resilient Hawaii was and how we lifted ourselves up as Nohana. And actually that's going to, just like because we had fewer casualties from COVID and people saw that Hawaii is caring, that people will come back to Hawaii forever, the same thing can be said of the Maui wildfire. And so though we've had this 20 to 25% persistent drop in travelers there, long-term, Maui is going to be more popular and famous than ever as the recovery occurs because they saw our heart. And it's our job to express that and show that, which is why HTA will do an extraordinary job advertising that and sharing that with the world. We also went to Japan recently to demonstrate our commitment to the Japanese tourists and travelers. And that is a different and harder sell, admittedly, because of the global economy, because of inflation, and just because the Japanese travelers aren't traveling quite as much. But again, we show them our hearts, and I can tell you every single person that we meet, whether it's in LA or Japan, or a lot of the team has gone over to Taiwan and now Korea, and then of course across the United States, they know that Hawaii is the place to visit. And it's really that work. It's that recovery, it's these moments that we're with them, and frankly, it's that we do stand out. We stand out with our values more than I think anyone else can express. The mainland can't do that. They're in conflict all the time. They can't suddenly say the Southwest supports this or that. They're not cohesive. If we stand together, and I mean this, if we stand together, even though we sometimes have differences, and I know we have conflicts, but if we stand together, we stand to benefit more than anyone can imagine. And that's the luxury of the perspective I have. Seeing people who I hold dear come together, even in times of conflict, if we use our values, then we are going to skyrocket ahead. So I'm grateful for that. I'm going to speak to just one or two more points, because I know you're going to have a full day. In the aftermath of the disaster, and this is what I want people to understand, and I'm using this room so you guys can share and discuss and debate in the next 4 to 6 months what you think is right. In the aftermath of the disaster, a couple things will happen. One, we have to recover. Two, it's going to be more difficult for a time for us to do certain things like insure our homes, our condos, our businesses. The casualty and property damages were significant, $3 billion. And the whole world is dealing with that, where fires raged in California and Oregon, in other countries. We have to be able to mitigate future fires. We have to be able to put in resources, and that's why I'm glad, for instance, our Secretary of Transportation, Ed, is here. He knows this. He's already doing it for us, cutting fire breaks, making things safer. If you notice, knock wood, this was a much safer fire season, obviously, than the last, but in comparison to all the other years, it's actually been a very safe period because of the work that's already been done. But that's going to cost money. And I think at the end of this rainbow, the insurance industry is going to probably have a little chip on their shoulder because of the payments that went out and the fact that I'm pushing back. I'm not allowing large hunks of the settlement to vanish. I'm going to make sure that they go to our local families. So we're going to have to prepare ourselves for that. And as you know, I'm constantly pressing at least the philosophical question of how do we raise enough money and where do we raise it from to mitigate the impacts of climate change, fire risk, and now also what is likely an impending insurance crisis. So I want you guys to debate that openly and think about it. I've already had a few discussions, and I'll not get into too much detail about this, but it's very important that you all hear it from me. There's absolute transparency from me. Hold your breath for a minute. As we look at the TAT tax, and I know that we don't want to put pressure or undue pressure on the tourism industry because it is absolutely the core of it's our engine. It is our economic engine. But as you look at it, And as you look at increases in the TAT tax, I want you to internally discuss how we set aside a hunk of that money, if it goes up, directly for the HTA budget, directly for advertising, directly for improvement of the beaches in front of Waikiki and all of our hotels and the beach parks. And at the same time, set aside some money, and I'm speaking directly to decision makers, set aside some money so that we can fortify our insurance picture so that we don't lose businesses, so we don't lose hotels that can't get insured, so that we are prepared if, God forbid, there's ever another major disaster. And so when you hear or see a proposal from me that touches on increases, or we talk about these impact fees and so on, know that that's where I'm coming from. And also know that if we do it, we have people here that will negotiate a particularly good deal for the tourism industry to further amp what we earn, to further amp what we can bring in, while at the same time protecting ourselves against the future. And that's the debate I want you guys to hear from me in person today, because it's really important. It is important that we move forward here in the 21st century with the extra challenges we have. We tell people, if you're going to come to Hawaii, we are being protective of the beautiful land that we have, that we're being thoughtful about restoring what could be lost otherwise from sea level rise or erosion. And they are contributing positively to that. And that is the case that I intend to make to our legislative leaders, to our HTA leaders, to all of our tourism industry, because once again, I think if they see our heart out there across the world and they see that we are protecting Hawaii for them and for our families, that people will continue to embrace us. So in closing, just know how much I appreciate you. Thank you for standing strong and helping so many people that went through tough times in these past years, and know that I'm going to be there for you 100%. Much love. Aloha.